Hello and welcome to Perfectly Paranormal, episode 50. My name's Annaschmidt, and I'm here every week to share with you true paranormal encounters and information about devils, demons and dark energy beings that no one else talks about. And today we're exploring the connection between dark energy beings and past lives. Do they come through with us through previous lifetimes? And how does their presence affect us in this lifetime? Now, I'll be sharing two clients' experiences today with how detrimental energy beings were affecting their lives and their mindset in this lifetime, and how medical and mental health professionals couldn't fully find the core of their problems. Many people believe that we experience many lives. In other words, our souls keep reincarnating into new bodies and going through a type of soul evolution, learning, growing, discovering, all that stuff that the spiritual people talk about. You know, finding our true path and solving long-term problems that have been plaguing us for centuries. Now, I've always wondered, is there a connection between our behaviours and our experiences in this lifetime and our previous lifetimes? And can dark entities attach to us and travel through with our soul energy into each lifetime? Now, I've worked with many clients who have been what they called cursed. They've experienced nothing but bad luck in their lives. Everything that they attempt to do just seems to fail, even from childhood. They've not experienced any personal growth, anything that's made them feel good about themselves. And when I hear that, this is what makes me think, do these dark entities sometimes travel through with people, through the experiences that they have, and they just continue to kind of plague them until someone like me comes along and can unpack what's going on? Now, the following story you'll find rather interesting. I've called this case study Dan's Debilitating Dilemma. Now, a client who we shall call Dan came to see me after being referred by a friend. Now, Dan had been suffering for years with what he called mind-splitting headaches. Now, all the migraine sufferers out there, you're going to know what he means. Dan had seen all the doctors. He'd had all the tests and taken all different types of medication for years to try and alleviate the pulsating, blinding headaches that simply put him into bed in a darkened room. And he'd be there for days and sometimes weeks on end. And nothing seemed to help ease Dan's pain long term. Dan met my first two criteria for doing energy work. He'd already seen the doctors, he'd seen the medical side of things, he'd attended consultations with mental health professionals to help rule out, to see if any of those issues were actually causing Dan's problem. But nothing seemed to help. Dan's problem was something different. It was something else that I hadn't seen before. There's not many things I haven't seen, but I'm always open to learning and expanding my knowledge, and what I learn, I get to share with you. So hang in there as I explain what was affecting Dan and how I discovered it. Now, like I said, Dan was referred to me by a friend who knew of my alternative approach to looking outside the box for energetic causes to our problems. Now, Dan booked in for a remote energy clearing, and the next day I set to unpacking the problems which had been plaguing Dan for years. Dan's case wasn't simple by any means, and I started with my usual fashion, looking for all the energetic imprints. So looking for emotional imprints, trauma imprints, any addiction issues, any black magic, curses, spells, portals, psychic attack, all that sort of thing. And I looked through Dan's energy body and his energy field. And of course, I looked for paranormals to see if they were attached to any of their favourite energetic food sources. Now, this was a long case, and it took about 20 hours to do the initial part of the clearing. The paranormal beings, though, they were interesting. They'd attach to emotional imprints, as they always do, but they weren't just from this lifetime. Now, I kept checking and clearing Dan over the next few days, and he said that he felt some improvement. He said the density of the headaches had changed, but they were still lingering in the background, and his sleep still wasn't good, and daily life still was difficult. So this got me thinking. I'm always ready to think outside the box, and I do like a challenge. So I sat with my pendulum one day and I just let it swing. It swings in a clockwise circle, getting ready. That's usually my yes sign, but sometimes it's a getting ready. So I'm sitting there with my pendulum and I'm going, okay, there's something else about Dan's case. There's something that I'm missing. What am I not tuning into? And what I heard in my head was rather interesting. Because your spirit guides don't give you all the information. You don't get screeds of information and like a textbook or a manual to follow. They'll give you a word or a sentence. And what I heard was, you need to go back further. And that got me thinking, because Dan's was one of the first cases that I had to deal with past life issues. So I'm thinking, okay, we've cleared everything from this lifetime that I can find through my process. And I went, okay, do we need to go back further? What do you mean? Do we need to go back to past lives? And as I'm thinking and kind of saying this out loud, because I talk to myself all the time, it's just something I do. My pendulum, like it was swinging flat out. And no sooner had I thought that in my mind and said it with my mouth, that I saw a very vivid image of a burly young man all suited up in his primitive armour in the middle of some sort of vast battle that was going on. It was all a little bit overwhelming, but I just sat with it because I needed to see something that would help Dan. Because if you listen to this podcast often, you'll know that I'm a feeler. I feel energy. Well, sometimes feeling is just not going to give you the information that you need. So I'm open to hearing, but I'm also open to seeing. I don't always like what I see, but sometimes you just got to go with it. So there's this young man in the middle of a battle, and there were arrows flying past his head, and there was yelling and blood-curdling screams. And without warning, I suddenly witnessed a very gory vision that explained Dan's mind-splitting headaches. Now think about those words, mind-splitting, and you're going to get the point. Like, I don't want to actually have to say it. Dan in his previous lifetime had been a warrior, and he'd been killed instantly through a blow to the head. Like bam, he was gone. And for some unknown reason, this trauma imprint followed him through 2 more lifetimes, and was now presenting in this lifetime to be cleared, or made null and void, is what I tend to call it. Now, Dan just needed to find someone who could recognise and unpack the issue, releasing Dan from this debilitating condition that put his life on hold. Now, 2 weeks after the trauma imprints had been released, all the emotional imprints had been released, any energy that was attached to that situation, Dan's energy started to improve. He said that he felt more motivation. He felt like he had more energy, like his energy had returned. The headaches were alleviated, and he felt like life was looking good again. Now, he was hoping that this was going to be long-term. And I said to him that I hadn't seen any other experiences that needed to be released. But I did say to Dan that this energy clearing wasn't a quick fix. It had identified an issue that traditional practices couldn't identify, but it was still going to be important that he saw his doctor, and if he needed to see a mental health professional. But he was so happy because the positive energetic shift that he experienced gave him hope. and he really, really took life, like he took full grasp on his life now. Because as I talked to him over the next few days, the next week or two, it was just like, I just feel like a new person. Now, isn't it interesting how sometimes these experiences we go through in past lives, whether you believe in it or not, like I didn't used to believe in past lives, but I kind of got slapped in the face with it with this case for Dan. So it's helped educate Dan, but it's also helped educate me is to not be limited in my thinking. And I found it fascinating that sometimes paranormal beings can also be attached to these types of deep past life imprints and travel through lifetimes with people. Now, also, you'll find this interesting. I've worked with parents who have had energetic clearings done with their children. Kids that are around about the age of sort of 6 to the age of 10. Now, some parents say that my child has just been angry since they were born. I don't know why they're angry. They have a good home life, good nutrition, good mental and emotional stimulation. My husband and I are happy. You know, we do argue, but we sort through our problems. The kids have a happy life. And it's just this one child that is just angry all the time. And the doctors and the mental health professionals can't find the problem. Now, when you tune into these youngsters with their parents' permission, because sometimes kids don't understand what you're doing, but the parents give permission, and I always ask, whether it's an adult or a child, I always ask permission of their higher self. If I get a yes, then I go ahead. And now I'm learning to always look back past this lifetime. Because sometimes you find these situations and experiences that are causing emotional and mental turmoil and the paranormal attachment, as these beings love to poke people to create more emotional food. So it's just fascinating to see how removing past life issues, removing paranormal attachments to past life issues can actually help people in this lifetime. Now, this next account I've called Satanic Satisfaction. Rather an interesting case. This man was very, very defiant. And you're going to see why the satanic issue was such a problem. Now, Mike loved all things dark and demonic. There's no other way to say it. The more satanic, the better. And his family just threw their arms up in the air. They simply didn't understand him. He'd been like it his whole life. And even at the age of 23, he just felt like an outsider, like he didn't fit into his family, didn't fit into life, he didn't know why. He didn't like being an outsider on the family unit, but he knew nothing else, as his love for his activities, his satanic activities, his black magic activities, they enveloped his thinking, a little bit like paranormal addiction. And he didn't know why, but it seemed to be ingrained into him to be this way. And his family didn't cope. They didn't understand it. They didn't like it. They didn't know what to do. You know, they'd gone down the medical and the mental health path. And they didn't find any illnesses that could be causing Mike's problem. Now, like I said, he didn't know why he craved these satanic practices. But it wasn't black magic or spells or hexing people that he loved. But it was more so a really dark fascination with the devil, with Satan, with Lucifer, and what that energy could offer Mike. He wanted to gain influence, he wanted to gain power, he wanted to be seen as someone important. Now, Mike had a long-term girlfriend. She'd been with him since high school. And she'd just about had enough of Mike's behaviours. She was like, I love you, but I am not doing this anymore. You go and see Anna. I know what she does. She's helped some friends of mine. We trust her. And Mike's like, nope, I'm not doing it. Well, she's like, if you don't do it, I'm out the door and I won't come back. I don't like what you're doing. It upsets your family. It upsets me. I don't feel like I can live with you or continue our relationship. And unless you get something done. She said, you frighten me. And she said he just looked at it like there was no expression on his face. He didn't know what to do with that. And she said that she felt like if he didn't get help, death might come his way. He may take his own life. She just didn't know what else to do. And Mike agreed to see me just to keep her happy. And he didn't really know what I could do to help him. But he was kind of open, but he wasn't open. Now, when I saw Mike's photo, I didn't need to meet him in person, because to do energy work, you just need permission of the person, and I like a photo of them because I like to talk to their photo, and also their full name. You don't need birth date, addresses, any of that sort of thing. It's just the permission thing to tune into them energetically. Now, with Mike, I started my usual energy clearing practice, just like I outlined in Dan's story. I did the clearing of the emotional and the trauma imprints from this lifetime. I looked at any addictions, any psychic attack, any detrimental psychic cording, any portals, any black magic occult, Ouija board, residual energy, anything like that might be in his physical body, organs, chakras, meridian lines, or his energy field. And also, of course, I looked at paranormal energy feeders. Now, halfway through Mike's energy clearing, I hit a solid brick wall, as they say. Something didn't want me going any further. Now, sometimes I get this, and what I do is I back off slightly, because you don't want to push up against whatever's pumping out that energetic vibration of go away, we don't want you here. So I had my usual conversation that runs along the lines of, I have been professionally employed to do a full energetic clearing for, and I say the person's name. You are not going to be harmed in any way, so I need you to step aside and let me continue with this clearing for him. And there was no change. It was actually more of a push in my face. It was like hitting an energetic brick wall, like you can't see it, but you can't go forward. Like I had brain fog. They weren't attacking me, but they're just like, sister, this is not your territory. He is ours. He belongs to us. Now, I dowsed for past life issues, and I got a really big yes swing, like I did with Dan's case. It was so strong that I thought my hematite point that I have on the end of my pendulum was going to go flying off the chain. So I just kind of calmed it down. I said, thank you for showing me. And I thought to myself, I just need to go slow and steady, because I'm a little bit gung-ho sometimes. My energy is quite fast-paced. When I do this paranormal work, I get quite heightened. It's like being on a spiritual high. Now, the first experience was connected to the second. Dan, in this lifetime, was living out something that had happened to him 2 lifetimes ago. Now, in that 2 lifetimes ago, he'd been forced into satanic practices as a victim, and he lost his life because of it. Now, you don't need to know the gory details, but you can kind of get the idea of where I'm going with that. Now, dying in that lifetime sort of led him into the next lifetime, obviously. So he came back, this time, as a practitioner of dark arts. So he's still in one previous lifetime ago. He's not in this lifetime yet. This stuff gets so complicated. I'll write it all down as I go so I don't get confused. So like I said, he came back as a practitioner of the dark arts. I saw him as some sort of demonic gangster. He was a young man in that lifetime, and he had his own way of doing things. Like, he's always been a real individual. He doesn't like following what other people want him to do. And he would be sending out demons to attack those that had done wrong by him. Like, his ego was massive. Now, the paranormal beings that attached to him in the previous lifetime, this is 2 lifetimes ago, were really enjoying this new host's evil ways. And they kind of happily triggered and provoked him to get deeper and deeper and deeper into the satanic practices. Now, Mike upset many, many people in that lifetime, and he became known as a summoner of the darkness, who sold his soul to the devil, basically. And in that lifetime, he lived in a little sort of village, not a real country town, but still. The villagers, as they called themselves, they didn't like him at all. They didn't want him in the town, and he simply wouldn't leave. So some of them took it upon themselves to set his home on fire, and they burned him and his dwelling to the ground. So Mike has had some pretty hard times in his previous lifetimes. I hate to think what he was up to before these last two lifetimes. Anyway, now we're going to head into this lifetime for Mike. Now, he was a dark child. Like, his girlfriend had talked to his mum, and she'd shared this information freely. She's like, I don't know what is wrong with my son. He's at the same level of care that all the other kids did, but he's just always been dark. He was prone to hurting himself. There was a little bit of self-harm going on there. And he used to pull the wings off flies and butterflies and things. And he used to like to watch things suffer. And his mum said, look, he could lie through his teeth and get whatever he wanted. And she didn't know whether he was lying or not because he was so good at lying. She said, look, he's going down the path of becoming a psychopath, and we simply just don't know what to do. Now, she said that his family were kind, and like most families, they had their ups and downs, but overall they talked about their problems and they kind of supported each other to get through them. This was in early childhood, like the tweens, like the teenagers, and heading into, I think Mike was the youngest of 4 kids. So he'd seen all the others and how they'd been treated and how they'd been looked after, and he was treated the same way, but he was still so dark. His mother could see it in his eyes. Like, he had blue-green eyes, but she said sometimes they were almost black. Mike experienced a type of past life possession which carried through into the now, and these beings would eventually take him down and probably fully drain him of his life force if he didn't get rid of these beings. Like, he kind of didn't know they were there because he'd always been this way. So he was a little bit resistant. Like, his higher self said yes. The words that came out of his mouth were yes, but the way he said it kind of said no to me. So every time I tuned into him, I still asked permission. Do I have permission of your higher self and your physical self to continue with this energetic clearing? And I kept getting a yes. So I think he was just a little bit frightened. Who am I? This is what I find quite often with people. Who am I with these paranormal beings gone? Who am I when they're out of my life? Because they've been with me for so long, through lifetimes. Mike understood that it was going to be a slow process, and I think it needed to be. So these beings actually chose to leave him. They conceded. And it took, like I said, probably about 3 weeks, but they went. Now, Mike told me that he felt the shift. He said he felt lighter, and he felt waves of cool energy that flowed through him. And it was the strangest feeling that he has ever experienced. He said he wasn't frightened by it, but he was like, something has shifted. I feel different. There was a little bit of panic when he spoke to me on the phone because he's never been any other way. He's never known anything else other than these 6 demonic level beings that were within him. Now, 6 is a lot. I find if I get 3 attached to me, I'm like, whoa, I can really feel them. Brain fog, stomach aches, can't walk properly, all my usual symptoms. But to carry 6 through lifetimes would have been really hard on his physical body, his emotional body, his mental health. But he knew it was for the best. He knew they had to go. And his learned habits that he'd taken on board over these lifetimes had to now be undone. Like his girlfriend, she understood energy work more. She believed in it. She knew and she could see the shift in him. She actually messaged me and went, I don't know what you've done, but he's different in a good way. She said he's different in a good way. He looks lighter. Like his smile is different. The way he walks is different. She said she couldn't put it into words. And she texted me over the next week or two just to let me know how he was going, because I didn't want to be in his face and keep asking, how are you, how are you, how are you? But I was curious to see how he was. Now, his girlfriend, she stayed with him. They stayed together. She felt this very, very strong shift in him. And he'd started to move away from the paranormal. He had no interest in it anymore, because the interest had come from partially the paranormal attachment, partly the learned behaviours that he'd had in those previous lifetimes. He decided that he was just going to focus on work, focus on exercise, focus on his girlfriend. His family were now happy. They could see that he was happy. They were more relaxed around him. This is how energy work works, is it changes, it alters the energetic vibration that a person pumps out. So they're feeling it. They're like, wow, I feel good, I feel lighter, my brain feels great, my body feels good. But their family can also feel that vibration of being around them. It's hard to put into words unless you've experienced it. Now, if you look at it, dark entities and this sort of concept of past lives, they're really, really intriguing. Now, they challenge a lot of people. Like the idea of dark entities in this lifetime freaks people out. But you imagine them thinking that they're carrying these malevolent or negative energies with them through past lives into this lifetime. Now, a lot of people, in the exploration of past lives, there are a few sort of spiritual traditions and alternative therapies such as past life regression. Some spiritual practitioners and regression therapists believe that delving into past lives can help individuals uncover and heal these unresolved issues. Now, it's part of the problem. You've then got to deal with it, how it affects you in this lifetime. So it's just fascinating. I just hope you've really enjoyed hearing these stories today and how it can just open the doorway to thinking about life from another perspective. So in episode 51, we are busting open the myth about ghosts, spirits and dark beings following you home. Can they really do it? And if so, why would they even bother? You know, how do you move them on? I always get asked these questions, and some of my answers might surprise you. And also, as always, I share some of my personal experiences and some of my clients' experiences with spirits who have followed them home and how they turned their lives upside down. So thank you for joining me today. And don't forget, if you want to share a paranormal experience just with myself, or you would like me to share one of your experiences through my podcast, you can do a voice recording, or you can write out your experience and I will read it exactly as you have written. You can email me at spiritualbeing44@gmail.com. And for information on paranormal house clearing, you can visit my website, Spiritual Being. You will find the address in the description box. And I look forward to sharing this spooky space again with you next week. And remember, life is perfectly paranormal.